Across Europe, political landscapes are undergoing profound transformations. Traditional parties that once dominated public life are losing influence, while new political forces are gaining momentum by capitalizing on economic anxieties, social divisions, immigration debates, and growing distrust of political institutions. The voters who once identified with political center are increasingly turning towards alternatives that promise radical change, whether from the right or the left. France, long regarded as one of the pillars of the European project and a cornerstone of liberal democratic governance, now finds itself at the center of this political shift. As the country moves towards the 2027 presidential election, questions are mounting about the future of the French political system, the resilience of the Republican center, and the broader implications for Europe. Are we witnessing a temporary electoral cycle driven by public frustration, or a deeper realignment that could permanently reshape French politics? And if France moves towards the political fringes, what would that mean for Europe and the international order? I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
As France moves towards the 2027 presidential election, the rise of the far-right national rally appears stronger than ever. The Telegraph stated that yet recent reports suggest that tensions are emerging between Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, exposing differences over economic policy, pensions, and the party's long-term strategy. While Le Pen remains committed to a more populist and protectionist agenda, Bardella is increasingly presenting himself as a pragmatic leader capable of appealing to mainstream conservative voters and European partners. These divisions come at a critical moment as opinion polls continue to place the national rally at the forefront of French politics. The emerging rivalry highlights a central question: can the French far right maintain its momentum, or will internal contradictions undermine its path to power?
France's political shift could reshape Europe beyond Paris. Why France's 2027 election matters for Europe. France is entering a period of profound political uncertainty as the country moves closer to the 2027 presidential election. What once appeared to be a stable centrist order built by President Emmanuel Macron is increasingly giving way to a political landscape dominated by forces on the far right and radical left. Nearly a decade after Macron came to power promising to transcend traditional political divisions, his movement is struggling to maintain relevance. The political center remains fragmented, with no clear successor capable of uniting moderate voters. As concerns over immigration, rising living costs, economic insecurity, and public trust continue to shape political debate, many French voters are turning toward more radical alternatives. The primary beneficiary of this shift has been the national rally, led by Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella. Polls increasingly suggest that a national rally candidate could enter the second round of the professional election as the favorite. Meanwhile, the French left faces its own challenges: internal divisions and the erosion of support among working class voters have weakened its ability to present a unified alternative. Critics argue that many traditional left-wing parties fail to address the economic concerns of workers, allowing the far right to expand its influence in former industrial strongholds. The stakes extend beyond France. A far-right victory would reshape not only France's politics, but also the future direction of the European Union and the broader European political order.
Nearly a decade after Emmanuel Macron rose to power, promising to strengthen France's political center, the country faces growing polarization. Economic pressures, immigration debates, security concerns, and social tensions have all weakened traditional parties and fueled support for anti-establishment movements. The far-right national rally, led by Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, is closer to power than ever, while the radical left continues to gain ground. As France approaches the 2027 election, the outcome could reshape not only French politics, but also the future of Europe and its global role. To discuss these developments and also examine the prospects for France's political future, we're joined from Westminster by Mr. Meher Nicholas Fazli, Director of the EU ASEAN Center, and from Paris by Dr. Abdelwahab Ghairi, Political Researcher and Director of France-Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Welcome, gentlemen, to Qnews. Thank you so much for being with us. Mr. Fazli, now how would you describe the current political mood in France as the country moves closer to the 2027 presidential election?
I'm delighted to join you today, and as usual, a short disclaimer. So everything I say today is purely a reflection of my own personal opinion. That being said, the mood in France is gloomy. The mood in France is pessimistic, and it's true of many European countries. Like, from that perspective, France is not exceptional. Today, I find myself in Westminster, in the heart of London, and 2 hours ago, Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigned, even though he has a huge majority in Parliament here in England. I think it's unheard of in recent, political history. And the same can be said of Macron in France. Macron was elected twice with a comfortable majority, and here he is today with an approval rating amongst French voters lower than 12%. So there's like nearly 90% of French voters today who despise and hate President Macron and everything he stands for. So the crisis goes beyond France. That malady is present at the heart of all big industrial nations, I'm afraid. And if you look at Germany or Italy, public opinion polls are not kind with the prime ministers or chancellors or presidents today. And there is clearly amongst voters the temptation of the hard right, of the nationalist right. I'm wary of calling it the far right because it's too cliched and it reduces them to what they were 40 or 50 years ago. But the world changed a lot in the recent past. So I would call them, nationalist, ultra-nationalist, or hard right.
Dr. Ghairi, now from a geopolitical perspective, why is the outcome of the French presidential election important beyond France's borders? Dr. Ghairi, can you hear me? I was asking you, Dr. Ghairi, from a geopolitical perspective, why is the outcome of the French presidential election important beyond France's borders?
Of course. Yes, the presidential election in France as a democratic European country is one of the most important elections that structure and reshape one of the pieces of democracy in France. It's most important more than the regional or parliament elections, because the presidential election come as of what the president have of interest to implement the plans that the party is elected from. This is from one side, because the political life is based on this. From my point of view, the political parties in France started to reshape and restructured by the practices that is a representative from one party. Let's start this from the Sarkozy party, that this is from a good party, and after it comes François Hollande. Because of François Hollande, let's give us an historical overview so that we can understand the political life in France in 2027, and what are the possibilities that parties can success in this presidential election. So the party has all the conditions so that he can succeed in the elections, and this is what happened. And we know what we have said in the statements, and what François Hollande said, that the main enemy is the capital. However, when he took the presidency and when he went in the Élysée mansion, he made the exact difference of what we have said, and all of what have promised, they did nothing, and all of the promises he gave it to the France, he didn't mean it, and he didn't made them. So he's a liberal person named Emmanuel Macron, and he took the chance. He didn't make a party, however, he made a campaign, cultural, political campaign, and called it Renaissance step, and he made a party. However, this gap, academic gap, that Lyon did, and who made Macron to go to the presidential period, he made from the far right, even from Marine Le Pen or other parties, to take the chance to convince to convince the French community to agree on his programs, and this is what happened. Especially this party lose all the fans, and he showed up a new party, which is the France's party, and some others called it the radical left, as the far right, but it's the radical left. However, what we have seen this time, after the campaigns and after the opening of the first presidential election campaign that Jean-Claude Mélenchon did in Saint-Denis, there are more than 27,000 citizens appeared and made all the other political parties to rethink again that this person can reach the power and take the presidential election. We know that the far right didn't decide so far a power or one representative to represent it in 2027, as is waiting from the resolution from the court next month in 7 July about what Marine Le Pen said in the cases regarding the finance problems from the EU, European Union, or can he, is these resolutions are correct or not, and in this case they cannot be a representative for France, and Jordan Bardella is an obstacle for the France elections because he cannot be equal either all before Olokjuma or with the party that is representative in Bruno Ottalion. Despite Bruno Ottalion have a lot of ideas of the national community of Marine Le Pen, I think the elections is still far away, and we cannot know that the lucky party to success in the presidential level. The elections are about 1 or 2 months. There are some predicts say that the party by Parti Le Pen will have more than 30 or to 32%, and then the France party will go by the leadership of Mélenchon. He's a charismatic figure, and academic figure. He know every time by media reports to know what the French community know, and he made the French community to rethink in the future of France, to say that he's the only one or political party. I cannot go to the evaluation of the political program now. We cannot evaluate it now either for the France's community or for the France or the political parties or for the Senate or for the radical left. There are a lot of parties, political parties, that will restructure their position after the elections and after reaching to the second period, because the only one that is more important in the elections is to get votes as much as you can, so that you can transform to the second round of elections. And there are some say that there is a competitiveness between the two electors or candidates. So I think there are some votes. Some give that the majority will succeed in the first round, and some others say that if this transformation and these steps go to Jean-Louis Mélenchon as being presented the president of France, of the charismatic figure and the analysis and history, and he's a very well-educated man, and he's a man of principles. He will succeed in the first round, and there will be a competitive stage. There are media reports that are working on now in the far right on France to divide France. Why? Because they're saying that the program of France doesn't suit what they are expected and of what the French community expect. But if we review the analysis, Jean-Luc Mélenchon pays what he have done of the geopolitical side. He pays the result of his relation with the European Union and his relationship with the United States of America and his relation to find a solution for the Ukrainian crisis with the relation with Russia and for the dialogue with Putin from the first beginning.
Yes, I get your point on that, sir. I will go now to Mr. Fazli. Now, Mr. Fazli, to what extent has Emmanuel Macron's political project succeeded or failed, in your own opinion, in preserving the political center?
I think it has failed miserably. And here, the choice of words is complicated, because, who's a real centrist, who's a right-winger, or who's a far-right, fascist. All these concepts, which may have been precise and true in political science 15, 20, 25 years ago, they lost a lot of meaning in the recent past. And here, I know that you guys started the show today referencing a recent article, I think published 2 days ago, by Foreign Affairs magazine, right? And that article in Foreign Affairs speaks about the danger, right? The danger of the far right in France, etc. And so, in a way, they're framing the debate in a very biased way, presenting Macron as the good guy and presenting, the National Front, Marine Le Pen, and Jordan Bardella as evil right-wingers. Personally, I have absolutely no sympathy for the National Front and the French far right. I'm actually very hostile to them personally. However, trying to be objective here, and that framing of the narrative is too nice with Macron. Like, it's too nice with people like Ursula von der Leyen or Macron, because it's casting them in a very positive light. And in reality, they don't deserve that. And why am I saying this? The choice of word matters, and there's a lot of framing and hypocrisy. And what do I mean here? So there are really fascist right-wing politicians, neo-Nazis, in government or supporting government today in countries like Poland, Ukraine, Denmark, Finland, right? And because they're pro-NATO, what a coincidence, they get a pass. And so because they're pro-NATO, these fascist and right-wing senators and MPs and ministers in Helsinki, Warsaw, and Kiev, and Copenhagen, etc., they get a pass because they support, Ukraine or whatever, and because of that, or they support neoliberalism or capitalism or free market or free trade. Because of that, they are painted by people like the Foreign Affairs magazine or the Time, or the New York Times. They're painted in a positive light. They are the acceptable far right. And there's the other far right, like the French National Front, who sometimes they criticize Ukraine and NATO in very polite terms. So it's not like they're opposed to NATO or Ukraine, but sometimes, just like JD Vance, actually, very, very similar to what JD Vance or President Trump say about NATO and the Ukrainian government. And
but just being politically correct.
Because of that, they are instantly described by Foreign Affairs magazine and the Washington Post as being evil, stinky Nazis. So here, there's really a double standard. So, the choice
ideology always exists when it comes to political analysis, Mr. Meher. We all know that. We all know that.
So the bias, and I'm putting my finger precisely on the Foreign Affairs magazine. These guys are far away. They're based in New York City, Washington, London. Many of them, Foreign Affairs magazine, they're former associates of, Ehud Barak or Hillary Clinton. And many of them, behind them, there's a think tank, and that's very powerful think tank. It's called CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. And that think tank is owned by billionaires, by center-left billionaires. And so, of course, these guys have no interest in defending, in analyzing French political or cultural dynamics in a rational, objective way. And they're very Manichaean. So what is Manichaean? It's always black and white, cowboys and Indians, Russians and Ukrainians, Palestinians and Israelis. Yes. And when it's black and white, it's very, very simplistic and very primitive. And the real world is not black and white. The real world is really shades of gray. And so these people are biased. And to conclude and reply to your question, I think the economic and social, Macron has been in power for 9 years, right? So in the past 9 years, the economic and social consequences of Macron's policies have been disastrous. It's a real disaster. And that's why French public opinion is hostile to him. It has very little to do with right-wing fascism or left-wing populism or whatever. It's because of failed, neoliberal, free market, pro-NATO policies, which are being rejected by public opinion the world over.
Yes, I get your point. Dr. Gheri, if you could give me a very, very brief answer to my question. Could these divisions affect the National Rally's foreign policy positions if it comes to power in 2027? Dr. Gheri, could these divisions affect the National Rally's foreign policy positions if it comes to power in 2027?
So, I don't think so, because if Jean Mélenchon be elected in France or Marine Le Pen or Jean Dorbeleppa on the election, there shouldn't be any core changes for France, neither from Le Pen or Le Pen, because the president, whatever his position, is confined by the parliament and constitution and the community and all the middle institution, as we say. All of what he can do is to be or to depend on his capabilities as a president to achieve his programs and to save the situation that control the country. Every president will be elected according to certain programs. The president Mélenchon is not as a Bardella or Le Pen. All of them have its own programs, its changes according to the court changes. However, the political situation make all the president is confined by responsibilities, either international agreements or European agreements or internal situation in France. He cannot change the situation like this way or suddenly, and according to the French societies, from my point of view.
Well, thank you so much, our dear guest today, Dr. Abdulwahab Al-Ghirri and Mr. Maher Nicholas Frazli. Thank you so much, both of you, for your valuable insights and for being with us here today on Q News. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.